I think one of the bits that's really interesting when we look at your career is most people don't actually get to have the opportunity to not only have different jobs, but to cross over different sectors and to experience that. And while I do want to go into some of those conversations and draw out from you some of the most fascinating aspects, what you're hopeful about, all of those types of things, what I would love to know is, for someone who isn't looking go into government or philanthropy or investment, but is really seeing their impact revolving around kind of an ecosystem that centres on their business and trying to figure out how to have impact in that space. If you were to draw on your broader experience across sectors, what are some of the lessons or advice that you would give to us as business leaders around two key things really, like where to start when doing this work and what are the things we need to be thinking about? Because you've seen a lot of pieces that could be warning signs and traps we can avoid. So I'm keen to kind of get you to jump into that piece first around where do we actually start from a business perspective to have impact in the world?
Such a good question. I guess as I would kind of think across working in business, working in government, working in the social sector, particularly in philanthropy, was the bit I was involved in. I guess the main thing I would say is that actually it never really felt that different. So one thing is that I think it's possible to kind of see these sectors as much more distinct than they actually are, but there could be a way of working that's fairly consistent amongst them, which I mean, at its simplest is as simple as saying, well, what is it that I'm trying to achieve? What unfair advantages do I have given where I sit in order to achieve it? And what's the group I'm going to get together to help me kind of use those unfair advantages to achieve something in the world? And what became very clear kind of working in these different places is that some things are different. Like you have different tools available to you. So if you're working in a business, you'll have know-how, you may have resources, you'll have insights into things that you're doing in the world that you could do more of, you could do slightly differently, you could do in a different way that helps you achieve more than one thing at once. So you do that. Or if you're in government, you might have the ability to put on different tools. You know, in government, you can often do things like just set the rules of the road slightly differently that kind of point in a certain direction. Or if you're working in the social sector, particularly in philanthropy, you often have the unfair advantage of time, right? You can think over a longer time period, and that makes some things feel much more possible than they might otherwise be. But if you can pull groups together, then you can get all of that happening from wherever you sit. So when I worked in business, spent time thinking about, well, how were we going to engage government and how we were going to engage civic society actors in some things we're trying to achieve. When I worked in government, it was about, well, in what ways can we find common cause with businesses that are seeking to make money and do the right thing. And when I was working in philanthropy, it was again kind of how do we build up the right collaborations. And the thing that always felt really important to me, and so nobody ever really told me about, was what felt most important was just finding people who had similar value sets to you. And that seemed to be much more important than kind of what sector they were in some ways, like what mandate their organization had. It's actually like, who are they? What do they care about? What are they trying to achieve? And starting from there, it often became clear to me that the differences between sectors were sometimes smaller than the differences within.